So I just want to ask you guys, if you guys had an opportunity this week to level up in any way. It's like, I always say, like in youth group, whenever I say, does anyone want to pray? I always say their shoes always become super fascinating. Really nice. Yes.
I had a fun opportunity with my son.
Okay.
I got to see him, and he just got a promotion, and now he's managing a person, one, which is new for him. So we had a fun chance to just sit and kind of talk shop a little bit with this.
Oh, nice.
Some of the stuff we've been talking about in here, share with him.
Nice.
And I gave him an assignment.
When's it due? Anyone else?
It was a rough couple of days at work. It's just last week I mentioned that things were going really well. That had been for quite some time, and this week didn't play out so well. And so I learned patience, and I learned how to keep my mouth shut and don't say anything before you regret saying anything.
Yeah, before you put your foot in your mouth, maybe, or something like that. Yeah, I get that. Thank you.
One of the opportunities I had just while I was at work talking to folks is I tried to focus more on just listening. Like at work, I don't specifically have a leadership role by position, but when I was talking to folks this week, I've made a more conscious effort to just try to listen to people when they talk.
That's awesome. Lincoln?
Yeah, one of my lower levels of leadership I mentioned was my family. So my mom was going through something at work, and she said she wanted someone to talk to. So I was similar to Chris, where I just kind of sat down and listened to her for like 30 minutes, and it was helpful, she said.
That's awesome.
Well, I was a huge failure.
This is level up, now you feel like a level down.
I'm being very authentic and transparent.
Yeah.
If anyone knows anything about an elementary school in the month of May, it's nuts. And I probably wasn't my finest, just because they drove me to it. That's the best I can do.
I get it. So Judah the other
Yeah, you know, don't you?
I'll say our 6-year-old, he's in kindergarten at BC, and Sam thought it was a casual day. And so she dresses him up, and she was actually selling it. They walked in, all these kids are in uniforms, and Judah has a lot of anxiety, but luckily, like, he had a Cubby outfit, but it didn't have the logo on it. And so he's so worried, Mom, I'm gonna get in trouble, they're gonna send me home. So she texted his teacher and she said, this is May kindergarten, we're just trying to make it through, I don't care. Like, we're not worried about that. We're just worried about making it through this month.
Insane, yeah.
All right, anyone else? See, last week David said give time of silence, now I'm learning. All right, so let's move on. What did you learn or notice from your assignments this week? From the readings or anything online, Facebook, any of the videos you guys watched? Does anyone want to share anything that stood out to them? All right. This will help break the ice. So let's go to the next one. Maybe we should do the table questions first like we did last week, because I think this helps break the ice. We're going to give you guys 3 minutes, just like last week, to talk at your tables of what comes to mind when you hear the word influence, and share with your table 3 settings or contexts where you have influence. So just take a few minutes to talk about that, because today this is what we're going to be talking about, and then we'll get back up and talk more.
I think it's a YouTube influencer.
We got all. No, I've been in the class. Well, there you go. That's the perfect setting. Which leadership class? You serious? Yeah. FRL, supervisory, something program. Sure. Culture.
You have to have access to it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's when I think of influence, just think of giving somebody a reason
Well, not even necessarily,
just,
just access
to do something different.
So like if you're walking down the grocery aisle and you see somebody you kind of know, you don't look at the next grocery aisle. Yeah, so you have to like.
Giving them a reason to do something different.
Just influencing them to care for everybody else, happy birthday or support somebody if they
Or I
want
guess
to
I'll
answer
just write
correctly.
to
Are there 3 settings where you have influence? Well, sure. I also work in a school, so it is easier now, so being able to influence people is much easier. People respond when they're.
Yeah, I didn't go both ways.
Exactly, the right word would be, when they're stressed and they're looking for any kind of relief, anything that you can do to give them any kind of grounding or influence them to look at something a little bit differently. It's pretty easy. High stress.
I'm trying to follow the year, we'll see how that goes.
And I guess other influence, I mean, obviously at home,
All
I
right,
have
so-
young men that are
Well, we know
preparing to
work
make
is
big choices in their lives
We know
and
some-
venture off into different things. They are also probably stressed, and so it's also probably a little bit easier to influence them to think about things a little differently.
Doesn't speak or even makes eye contact, or doesn't speak.
I know 3 is a lot
No
for
matter
me.
what you say.
That's what I go.
This is really funny, so, I go to the leadership.
Oh, he's talking about tomorrow? So tomorrow.
And everybody's so nice, it's been like a smile, and everybody's just talking.
I got nothing. I'm in class.
This year, right after going to the global leadership summit, I walked.
I got nothing.
When I think of influence, I think of
It's such a stark contrast. So I tried to smile when I talked.
I won't follow a fake person.
I never go that.
If they're fake,
I go to Kroger all the time.
Right.
It was in this place, like, this one minute, and then the
three
next minute, I was
things where I have influence
people
will
will
at home.
Okay, so homework everywhere.
I don't go any place for me if I was
They need lots of influence.
I send a text message and they're all in. They're adults.
Some of them are here now. I do think though, you know, I mean, I thought about that too. So we all went on a trip with some other friends to Kentucky and some different things,
But
but,
then
you
I was
know,
gonna say, well, you have to get every level.
we've talked about different people, where they're at, and just, I think just being genuine and doing things that are fun, but doing things that are right. I mean, I think you can influence those people.
Oh, yeah. I still want y'all.
I had a lot of good conversations about a lot
They
of
were very interesting, and very easy to follow.
just to have somebody.
All right, guys, time is up. So, what comes to mind when you hear the word influence? What are some of the things you guys talked about? What comes to mind?
Persuasion.
Okay, who said that? Yeah, persuasion. I like that.
Example.
Example. Lincoln asked me what came to my mind, and I said social media. It's like, it's a whole newer job nowadays, influence.
Well, the thing about influence is you can influence positively, or you can influence negatively.
Yeah.
And here we always look at it as like the positive for the most part, but I think there's a lot of really negative influence out there too. So.
Very much so. Sometimes I think there's more negative influence than there's
It
positive.
does seem that way sometimes, hope not.
Anyone else want to share what comes to mind? So share with your table 3 settings or contexts where you have influence. So what do you guys say? What are some contexts where you guys have influence?
Wow, we're quiet today.
Huh?
We're quiet today.
Yeah, quiet today.
Home, work, or social interaction.
Okay. Home, work, and social interactions.
We said those, we also said everywhere, you can be an influence whether you know it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be influencing, at the store by, the way you carry yourself or what you're buying or whatever.
That's exactly what we were talking about too.
You see someone with a bag, you could be carrying something and like, what is that? Like, oh, so good. You can influence them to buy something similar.
Pumpkin bagel.
I get influenced to buy stuff all the time. My parents always said I was a marketer dream because I watch a commercial, I'm like, I gotta go to Wendy's right now. Limited time only. Go! Yeah, I would say most of us, like within the context we've talked about, is where we'd say we have influence. If you have kids in your family or with your spouse, you may have influence at your work, even if you're not a boss. But this is what we're talking about today. So before I get into not giving away much of it, Dave's gonna come up and talk to us more about influence.
Alright, so our big theme for the night is that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So, by the author of your book. I feel like just listening to you guys, there's like all these things, all these tangents I want to go off and talk about influence a little bit. Like, what's the difference between influence and manipulation? I mean, I know manipulation is bad and influence is good, but where do you draw the line? So that's just something to think about a little bit. We had a really funny experience this week. We were out in Oregon, and Liam and Gabby are looking for a house. So they're looking to buy their first house. And so we went open housing with them, which is a very unique experience out there. But we were in one of the houses, and this guy came in, just walks up and starts talking to us. He's asking us all these questions about, what do you think about this house? You know, do you think it's priced well? Do you think it looks good? And then he says, we live right around the corner, and we're gonna sell our house in about a year. And I'm just trying to, gather information. And then the kids actually went upstairs with the realtor, and we stayed down and just talked to this guy. He's about our age. And basically he's like, we're moving to the Carolinas, we're getting out of here. We don't want to live here anymore, and just goes on and lists all these reasons why. And it was really fascinating because there was this part of me that's like, I kind of want Liam and Gabby listening to this so he can influence them, right? So there's a guy I never met, probably never see him again, but he had the potential to be a significant influence on a really major life decision. He wasn't, because they weren't there, but that was the thing. Another thing when we think about influence is who influences us, right? Because I would argue that in life, in every relationship, there is a level of me influencing and me being influenced. And the better part of wisdom is to know how much of each I need to give and take in a relationship, right? So there are some relationships where I need to be more influential and less influenced. And there are some relationships in which I need to be more influenced and less influential. And understanding that, I think, is one of the most important discernment things you can learn in life. Because if you get that one the wrong way, you're gonna be in real trouble. You're gonna be influenced by the wrong people, and you're not gonna influence the right people. So all of these are just kind of things I was thinking of. That so chew on those, explore those as we go. But I want us to start out by thinking about who we influence. Okay, so one of your questions was, in what context do you have influence? And I created this grid to help us think. This is kind of like how I think. I think in like tables and spreadsheets. So columns and rows, all my thoughts go this way. So think about it this way. We influence people strategically, and we influence people accidentally, right? There are people who I am extremely strategic because I want to influence them. And so there are things I do in my life designed specifically to influence people. And there are people that I influence accidentally. And we'll talk about some examples of what those might be. Also, there are people who are distant from us that we influence. So people we don't really know all that well, we maybe know a little bit. And there are people who are close to us that we influence. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. So everybody you influence can probably fit into these categories. So let's walk through. The people who are distant from me, but whom I'm strategic to influence, we would call this modeled. Okay? So I live in a way, I don't have a lot of interaction with them, but I live in a way that they can watch me. So as a pastor, this is the majority of the gathering, right? I want to be very strategic about how I influence the people at the gathering, but we had 815 people at church on Sunday. I can't have a close relationship with that many people. So I have to be very careful about how I live my life. That means even when I'm out in the community, I want to model life the way I think it should be lived. I want to model life the way I want other people to live it, so that they see it. So that's one level of influence, is just how we model life for people we know and we want to be strategic about, but maybe are distant. The people that we're strategic about, that we're very close to. So this is family, friends, probably in your job sometimes, other contexts like that. These are the ones that we're actually like mentoring. And that doesn't mean it has to be like an official mentoring type relationship where you sit down and have conversations, but where you're very intentional and saying, hey, I want to be strategic. So for me, this would be like our church staff. some of the people on our church staff. This would be my family. This would be my small group. And here, it's more than me just showing. It's actually having conversations. It's talking about the deep parts of life. It's listening, like we talked about last week. It's learning how to interject into their life some of these really important things to me. There's also accidental influence, though, right? So I accidentally influenced people close to me. This is mirrored. And I think you mentioned that there's good and bad influence, right? And sometimes this is where the bad influence happens. Not always, right? We can accidentally impact. Like, I think there are things that my kids say and do and ways that they behave that I was never strategic about teaching them, but that they picked up, right? You sit in an airport, which I just got to do, and I think it's hilarious because you see this more with fathers and sons than anyone else. But you can tell when a father and son walk by because they walk the same, right? 85% of the time, they walk the same. They carry themselves the same, even if they don't look alike, even if they have very different body shapes. There's just something about it, and you wonder, well, how does that happen? Right? It's because the son just they learn to walk by watching their parents, and so they mirror us. So this can be good and it can be bad, but in your mind, it probably causes you to say, okay, so I got to be careful, right? Because if the people who are close to me are going to mirror me, what do I want them to mirror? How do I want to influence them, even when I'm not thinking about it? And then there are people who are distant from us that we accidentally influence. And I mark, it's an M word. We leave a mark on their life, right? That's it. So I am occasionally a soccer referee. Okay, so I way for me to stay in shape a little bit, be around the game I love without getting hurt. When we landed on Wednesday, we went out for dinner with our kids. They're like, "Oh yeah, we have a soccer game tonight." It was like at 10:30 at night, and that would have been 1:30 our time. Like, yeah. And then our daughter-in-law Gabby's like, "Oh, David, you should come and play." Like, I don't do that anymore, especially not at that time. But I still referee because it's fun to be on the field. So I actually do influence people there. Usually it's accidental, right? Like if I make a really bad call and some kid complains and I say something mean and nasty, I don't even think about it, but I left a mark on his life, right? And so this is one of those places where accidentally people we don't even know, like when I'm driving and I give somebody the one way to heaven sign because they were driving poorly, I've left a mark, all right? So here's where we would all say we want to be strategic with our influence, but we also recognize that sometimes we're not, and that influences. So I want us to stop and talk about this as a group, all right? So who in your lives has influenced you in one of these ways? So think about the people in your life that influence you, and then try to figure out where that fits on your grid. Just anybody who's ready can go.
So, your comment just then about what was it, one way to heaven? So, I'm living in Clarksville, Tennessee. I'm getting into the turn lane, and this woman wants to be where I am, except she's coming off the road. I mean, I have the right of way. And so she comes out at me aggressively. We're at a stoplight, and I turned around and looked at her. I mean, I literally turned my body all the way around to look at her. Right as I did, she flipped me off with both fingers. Now, this woman was beautiful, professionally dressed, in a very nice car. And then she realized I was looking right at her, and she goes like that, like she realized what just happened. And when that happened, I determined I would never, ever flip another person off where they could at least see it in a car. Because, I mean, I saw how it affected her and how that obviously wasn't who she wanted to be, and when she realized I saw that. So she marked me, but probably not in a way, not in a bad way, even though her actions were great.
What a great story.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Somebody else?
My dad.
Okay.
I feel like he's definitely modeled.
He lives a way that you want to live.
Yes.
Yep, that's awesome. Good. Somebody else?
So when we lived in Northern Virginia, there was a couple that sit in front of us in church, and just by him, we watched his interactions with his wife, and then we got to know him a little bit because we fed at a homeless prevention center. And he never told us who he was, and we built a relationship with him, and we're real good friends with him today. But he had such a positive influence, I think, on both of our lives. And come to find out, well, after we became friends, I'm like, okay, Tom, who are you? Because he reeked of just like leadership, and you're like, I'm gonna follow that guy no matter what. If he wants to rob a bank, hey, I'm your guy. We'll rob a bank. Well, come to find out, he's a 2-star general in the Marine Corps. He is the training general for the Marines. So he worked for the commandant at the time.
He was.
Huh?
He was.
He
at
was.
the time.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, anybody else? There's another question. Some of you already know you're saving your ammunition. All right, so next question is, let's think about the downside for a minute. Because we've already acknowledged that with influence, there is sometimes that unintentional downside. As you look at these different contexts, what might be the unintentional downside of how we influence people? So we've kind of talked already about, if you're an angry person, and like, I would never do this, but if you flip people off while you're driving, what are some of the other unintentional downsides of the way we might influence people? And you can have an experience of the way someone's influenced you. You can share that.
I don't mean to be redundant about your job, it's just on my mind. Mirror comes to my mind. I have to be very deliberate and just really watch myself, because they're little parrots. And they are watching me all the time. How did she react to this? Or how did she react to that? And I can either do it well or fail miserably, and they're watching.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like a heavy responsibility, but so I'm always mindful of, I've got like 25 little sets of eyes just watching.
And remembering everything.
They are, and then they go home, and then they tell their parents everything. My parents have to know that they come back and tell me everything
Right.
too.
Yeah, you have a black guy right there.
I've got one accidental, I was a deputy sheriff for a long time, and this situation I'm about to share happened 20-some or longer years ago, because my daughter was young. On my day off, I happened to go to the BMV to get my license renewed, and there was this lady in the line in front of me who says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And when people do that, you're like, okay, where do I know you from, right? She goes, "You arrested me, and you were so nice to me and talked about how I could turn my life around and I didn't have to live like that." And she goes, "I got out of prison and I've remembered you ever since." And she thanked me for it. I didn't even remember who she was specifically, but it felt good that
That's
she
awesome.
did that, but it was and it's certainly an accidental.
Yeah. That's such a great story, because obviously you marked her life, and we would look at this grid, right? And our first glance, we'd look at it, we'd say, this is the most important box, right? This is the box where I think I can have the most impact. And the reality is all of them are important, but this is the one where we can, who knows? And we don't know a lot of times what influence we've had there. So that's a great story.
I
Good.
was sharing with them that last night I received an inbox message on my Facebook. I did a talk a little over a year ago. Saw this lady that was there. Her mother and I knew each other, but I hadn't seen her in over 20 years. Well, I get a message from her, and she's seeking my help with her career decisions. I work in human resources, and so she heard my story and just reached out to me and said, I feel like God put it on my heart to reach out to you. So I'm meeting with her Saturday to help her, but it was kind of just out of the blue, and it kind of shocked me a little bit. And somebody said over here, listening to somebody and talking to them, I was just trying to get a sense of what her issues were and just listen. Didn't make any type of decisions or give her advice or anything like that. Just listen and ask questions. So
I love that. That's awesome. And because you're willing to say yes to an opportunity, you have the opportunity now to even make a bigger impact. So that's great. All right, don't put the next slide up yet. Okay. I want you to think for a second about the context in which you have influence, okay? And probably here we're talking about mostly people close to you, maybe some distant, and really where we're strategic. Think just for a second, what are the outcomes in other people's life that I would like to see as a result of my influence? All right? So this can be anywhere. So, we've named family, friends, church, and work as kind of the 4 big contexts. And there can be others. But as you think about those contexts, the people you have the opportunity to influence, whether distant or close, what are the outcomes that you want to see in their lives as a result of your influence? Just think about that just for a second. Just kind of make a list. And let's just list them off, shout them out. Just 1 or 2 words, 3 words, a sentence if you need. What are some things?
I always want people to interact and feel lifted up. I mean, hope, or I certainly don't want to make people feel worse.
Right. and courage. That's a great one. What else? Successful. Awesome.
I want people to know they have value, no matter how they feel in that moment.
Yes, value.
Everybody should know that.
Good.
Empowered.
Empowered. Yes. Good words. Others?
Loved.
Loved. All right. I made a list on my own. I didn't do as well as you. You can put the next slide up. So here are some potential outcomes. Healthy. People can have healthier habits. I think you can see in this event that my personal bent towards action, right? Healthy habits, personal discipline, meaningful success, clarity of purpose, better teamwork and unity, better decision making, excessive joy, contentment, character development, life-changing service, more Christ-like lifestyle, kingdom, impact, spiritual growth. And pick what you want off of there, pick your own list. Influence is an amazing thing. Because influence is where we make other people's lives more valuable by what we put into it. Especially when we're strategic, but even when we're accidentally influencing, if we have a mindset of everywhere I go, everything we do, I am an influencer. And even the people I don't know and who I may never see again, they're watching me, and what they see may be life-changing for them. I mean, we're not gonna all arrest someone, but you never know how, you may smile at somebody who's having the worst day of their life. And that could have an incredible impact on them. So I want us to really kind of work our way through some thoughts on what are the outcomes of influence. And I kind of jotted down these thoughts here. My thing timed out. So I want us to consider the outcome of your influence. And here are just some biblical thoughts about the outcome of our influence. Number 1, influence always produces fruit. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but influence always produces fruit. And I'm going to take you to the book of Nehemiah to kind of talk this through. So I don't know how much you guys know about Nehemiah. We were studying Nehemiah here at the gathering back in 2020. And it was kind of funny because we had this series that we named Comeback right before we shut everything down and went away. But the story of Nehemiah is in Jerusalem after the Babylonian Empire has destroyed Jerusalem, and for 70 years there's been nothing happening in Jerusalem. And then God moves in the heart of the king of Persia, who's then taken over Babylon, and he says, you guys can go back and rebuild. And part of that rebuilding is this guy named Ezra. Part of that rebuilding is a guy named Nehemiah. There's also Joshua and Zerubbabel, who are all play key roles in this. But the book of Nehemiah is Nehemiah's role in the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And his role is really to rebuild the wall around the city. So Nehemiah is a person of influence in the Persian Empire. He's the cupbearer to the king, which means he is incredibly trusted because he's the one who makes sure the king doesn't get poisoned. And it probably means he's someone that the king relies on and looks to for wisdom, but Nehemiah is Jewish. He's like Daniel, he had risen up the ranks. And so he hears that these people who have gone back to rebuild Jerusalem have started the project, but that the walls around the city are still lying in rubble. And back then, that was a really bad thing because it meant anybody could come in and attack the city, and it was dangerous. It was just a terrible situation. And so God puts it on his heart to go back and rebuild. So he gets back and he discovers things are bad. And this is, he says to everybody in Jerusalem as he arrives in Jerusalem to start this project, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. That is not very encouraging. But what I want you guys to remember from the story of Nehemiah is that encouraging words produce courage or confidence. Okay? Watch what he says next. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good. So what he's doing here is he's just stepping into the situation. Hey, look guys, things are bad, but we can do this. So what he's doing is he's choosing to use his influence to encourage the people. And specifically, he's using his words. So when we think of how we use influence, I think one of the most important things is how do we use our words? Because words are so powerful, right? They have the ability to build up, they have the ability to tear down. And if I want to be an influencer for good, I have to use words that are encouraging. So what happens? And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. Next piece of Nehemiah stories in chapter 4. And here's where he's not using words, but he's going to set the example. Because setting the example produces engagement. So you guys can see how he's using his influence and is producing fruit. Initially, it produces action and confidence and courage in the people. And now it's going to produce engagement. It says, so we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out. So basically, he's just like, look, guys, we're going to get out there and we're going to work. And I'm going to work with you. The key word here is this one. Right? Do you see what he's doing? He's got all the authority. He's got all the ability. He could say, so they labored at the work. I told them what to do. I provided them the resources, and they labored at the work. But that's not what he does. He said we did, because he wants to do it with them. So if I want to be a person of influence, I have to set the example by being in the trenches with people. Nehemiah 6, people from the outside are trying to sabotage the work. These two guys, Sanballat and Geshem. And they're trying to, they're not Jewish. They don't want Jerusalem to succeed. So they're trying to sabotage. But what we see from Nehemiah is clarity and endurance. Okay, so Sanballat and Geshem sent to me saying, come and let us meet together at Hakaphirim on the plains of Ono. There's a preacher joke there. I'll get it to in a minute. But they intended to do me harm, and I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? And the joke is, if somebody ever says, come and meet me at the plains of Ono, say, oh. But I want you to see what the more important quote here is, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. So he has clarity and he's got endurance. He knows what's important. If I want to be a person of influence, I have to know what's important. We're going to see that a little bit more in a minute. But I have to know what's important, because I'm not going to influence people towards a good thing if I don't know what the good thing is. And I also have to have endurance. I have to be willing to keep going. Because here's the thing. Let's just say I want to influence people to eat more Swiss cake rolls. Okay? And in order to do this, I'm going to set the example by eating a Swiss cake roll in front of the church on every Sunday. Now here's the thing. Not everybody goes to church every Sunday, right? And so there might be somebody who's like a once-a-monther. I'm going to have to eat 4 Swiss cake rolls before they see me eat a Swiss cake roll. So I've got to have endurance. I've got to be willing to do the hard thing and keep doing the hard thing so that I can be a positive influence. And obviously, you don't eat that many Swiss cake rolls. I wouldn't. But if I want to be a good influencer, I have to have clarity and endurance, because those produce commitment. And the people respond. And here's how the people respond. Verse 15 of chapter 6. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month, Elul, in 52 days, which is this like miraculous speed that this entire project got completed. And the reason is because healthy influence produces healthy outcomes. And so what we see from the story of Nehemiah, and you should just read the whole book because it's really great, got lots of good stuff in it. But we see this guy who uses what he has to influence for the good. And his influence produces fruit. So influence always produces fruit. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Second, God holds us accountable for our influence. James in chapter 3 says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. So take this word teacher, because he's not actually talking about people like me. I mean, he is talking about people like me, but it's not specifically and solely people like me. Well, what he's saying is, if you choose to influence others, you are responsible for how that influence happens. Now, you're not responsible for everything that everybody else does. You can't, right? But you are responsible for what you put into it. So, there are good pastors and there are bad pastors. And there are some pastors who influence people towards vices like legalism and judgmentalism, those types of things, kind of missing the kingdom. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there are preachers who influence people towards kind of forsaking Orthodox Christianity. Jesus isn't God, there's no resurrection, that kind of thing. Those people are responsible for their influence. I am responsible for how I influence people, for how I teach, for how I live, for how I walk. But you are too. So if you accidentally influence someone who's distant from you in a negative way, you're accountable for that. Now, the good news is none of that gets held against us because of Jesus, right? But those are potentially crowns in heaven. That's kingdom work that we miss out on. And so we want to be really cognizant of the fact that God holds me accountable for my influence. And this should be more of a sobering thought and an encouraging thought than an anxiety building thought. Don't let it be that, right? Because in Christ, all is forgiven. God doesn't hold grudges against us. But what this really does mean is it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to be influential toward the kingdom of heaven. To use my influence, whether it's close, near, strategic, accidental, to use that influence to build the kingdom of heaven. Here's the third thing to remember about the outcomes of our influence, is that your outcomes are a reflection of your influence, or maybe of who's influencing you. Let's talk about the first part first. If everybody around you is a negative person, what does that mean? Maybe you're influencing that. If everybody around you is a critical person, maybe you're influencing that. I'll take it a step further. If anyone around you is a negative person or a critical person, I'm not saying you are, but maybe you're influencing that. If you find yourself surrounded by joyful people, maybe you're influencing. Did you see how this works? A lot of times, if we really want to know what level of influence we're having or what kind of influence we're having on people, pay attention to the people around you. Because the people around you will show you how you're influencing them. The people you spend the most amount of time with. And who's influencing you, right? So if I find myself always being negative, well, who's influencing me in that direction? If I find myself always being critical, who's influencing me in that direction? But when I'm really joyful, when I feel really at peace, when I feel really content, who are the people influencing me in that direction? And what's the obvious application to that? I want to put myself around people who are going to influence me in the right direction. Because influence is powerful. And the reality is, we said at the beginning that there's this balance we have to find in all of our relationships, right? How much am I influencing and how much am I being influenced? If I don't like the outcomes of my life, then I need to ask myself that question. It's not I need to abandon these people because they're influencing me poorly, right? It's hey, I've got to turn the tables on this. I've got to be more of an influence, and I've got to be less influenced. Or, man, these people over here, when I'm with them, I feel joyful and content and peaceful. I need to let them influence me more, and maybe I should try to influence them less. So that's the thing. So look at the outcomes of your life. And this is a great question for you to explore. What do I need to do with my influence? So here's our challenge for tonight. How do I become an intentional influencer? Okay, we keep using that. I think you pointed out we use that word a lot, right? Because I like that word. So I want you to look at these 5 things. I'm going to walk through them in a second. I want you to pick one of these. I mean, you can pick all 5 if you want, but a lot of times it's easier to start with one because I'm quite certain that for each of us here, we can pick one of these and say, I could do better at that. If I want to be better at influencing people, I could be better at that. So number 1, start with the end in mind. I stole this from Stephen Covey. It's habit number 2. Okay, but it's also one of my favorite things that he says, and I think it's one of the life skills that we all need, is I should be thinking ahead of time about what I want to happen. And then I should think about how do I make that happen. A lot of times in life, when we don't start with the end in mind, we end up somewhere we never thought we'd end up. And so if I want to influence Merle, I want Merle to be a happier person. Okay? So if I'm starting with the end in mind, what kind of thoughts might I think? We're going to pick on you for a second.
That's all right.
Anybody? How can I influence Merle to be a happier person?
By being happy yourself.
By being happy myself. Especially when?
When you're with Merle.
When I'm with Merle. Okay, what else?
I say remind him of his qualities, lift him up.
Yeah, that's so good. Right. If he had some qualities, we would really remind him of those. You guys don't know what a great guy Merle is. He sits down in the front row of church every Sunday and often bears the brunt of my preaching. So, and has to listen to 3 sermons sometimes, which is just.
Oh, I need them all 3. So
Yeah, no, I love that. Like, remind him of his qualities and the good things that he's doing. Right. So again, we're back to being strategic about how we influence people. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Merle is a person in my life that I want to influence. What should I be trying to influence him? I want to make Merle a happier guy. All right, so now what do I do to make that happen? And now if I can implement that, I'm going to really be a strong influence in his life. Okay, number 2, know your own core values. And I kind of mentioned this before when I talked about the clarity that Nehemiah had, right? I am doing a good work. If you don't know what's important to you, it's going to be hard for you to influence people in the right direction. So sometimes one of the most important exercises I can do is figure out what's really important to me. I actually did this week. So I'm going to tell people they should do this. It's a good exercise for me to do. And it's not like I don't know what these core values are, because they do drive me. And we have core values. The key here is know them, not invent them, to know what they are. But I took down, what are the values that drive me? And I came up with 4. Truth, contentment, gratitude, and joy. So if we go back to our grid of influence, I'm thinking to myself, if people watch me, what are the things I want to model for them? Well, that's it. I want to model truth, contentment, gratitude, and joy. What are the things I want? If people are going to mirror me, what do I want them to mirror? Well, that's it. Truth, contentment, gratitude, and joy. I hope that the people who are closest to me would say, yeah, I see that in David. And even more, I hope that the people closest to me would say, yeah, David brings that out in me. Because if I can live out my core values, even when I'm not being strategic about influence, I'm going to have a positive influence. All right? Number 3, choose proximity on purpose. You know who's really bad at influencing? Hermits. Right? If you're never around people, it is hard to influence them. And sometimes that means, especially for we introverts, spending more time with people. What's that?
You're an introvert?
Oh, terribly.
You
Yeah.
get in front of all those people? Wow, okay.
So here's the thing though. When I get up in front of everybody, I have the mic. I am in complete control.
But you're still, I mean, an introvert doesn't necessarily like to.
Not always, no.
So.
What actually tires me out more is like out in the lobby. So, people ask me on Easter, because I preached 4 times, wasn't that exhausting? I was like, actually, I felt really refreshed by the end of the day, because I had no lobby time. So, I mean, I love being in the lobby because this is valuable to me, is to choose proximity, right? But I know that tired me out. So, but if I want to influence people, I have to be willing to get into their lives. And so if I'm always ignoring people, always kind of staying away from people, I will influence them, but it will be accidental, and it may not be what I want. All right, so sometimes I have to choose proximity. Number 4, use your words to lift others up. We kind of talked about this with Nehemiah. We kind of talked about it with Merle. And I mean, we could just go on and on about how powerful words are. I'll let you guys talk this through. what are the kinds of words that influence people for the better? Like, talk about how people use their words to influence you for the better.
Truth and accountability.
Oh,
That whole, it helps me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good. What else?
Showing of appreciation, or just by saying, I appreciate you.
Does anybody here hate it when people say, I appreciate you? we love that. Everybody loves to be appreciated. All right, what else?
I think trying to remain optimistic going into difficult things, you know, not always using negative language, but being more optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Encouragement. Yeah. What else?
Genuineness.
Like, if someone says nice things to you, but you don't think they mean it, really doesn't help.
Yeah, or the people that say things automatically, routinely, and then
Like when you go to Chick-fil-A and you say thank you, and they say my pleasure, you're like, yeah.
but when somebody says something to you and you can tell they really mean it.
Yeah. All right, let's dig into that. What are ways that I can say something to someone and have them at least think that I really mean it?
You have to know them. I mean, if you don't know them, you can't say, I mean, you can, but they might not believe that.
Okay,
that that's
all right.
true.
So there's gotta be some relationship. So building relationship helps with that. What else?
Be specific about what it is you appreciate.
Yeah, so instead of I appreciate you, be I appreciate that you do this, or that you did that. Good. What else?
Eye contact.
That is such a good one. Yes, eye contact.
In this country,
All right, good. What else? How else can we use our words to build up?
It's funny what I've found over the last couple of years, because I've been working on that a lot, because it turns out that's a superpower, because it doesn't happen a lot, especially when you work with military, strangely. You just actually have to open your mouth and say kind things to people, and sometimes a lot of people are so shocked by it because they're so not used to it, that it just has a huge impact. I mean, you don't even have to like do something amazing or anything, you just say something kind to people.
Yeah. That's great. Talk about tone. How does tone impact your words and how they're received?
It could totally change the meaning.
Don't do it over text.
Well, I mean, in a world where so much of our communication happens on a screen, tone is often lost there.
Put a smiley face.
Yeah, put a smiley face. Yeah.
I heard something good is you have to mean what you say, but you don't have to mean when you say it. So the tone of how you demonstrate it or present it, I think, is important.
So to go back to what Chris said, like holding someone accountable, right? That really different because of the tone. Yeah, I mean, if I'm like, it doesn't feel so good, but if it's like, man, I love you and I want you to know this, it feels a whole lot different.
Absolutely.
Good. Can we speak with a certain tone that has nothing to do with our words? I'm not saying this very well, but can my body language or my facial expressions communicate a tone?
Yeah.
This is so hard for me because I am not a smiley person. And I have to remind myself all the time. See, right now I'm not smiling. I have to remind myself all the time to be smiley and be happy. Because I may be saying the best thing in the world. Like, I might be preaching the gospel and talking about how Jesus died for us and for our sins and he rose again. And this is the best news ever. And if I'm saying it like this and I'm like that, nobody's taking that, right? I gotta smile. This is really good news, guys. Now, how we use our facial expressions, how we use our body language, leaning in instead of backing out, arms open instead of crossed, fists don't I mean, you guys know this, right? Don't clench your fists, you don't like that. All right, last one. Reflect regularly. Again, here's where it's important for me to take time on a regular basis to simply think about who and how I'm influencing. Right? And maybe here's where we go back to that grid where we started. And I just think through really practically, okay, who is close to me that I want to be strategic and mentor, right? And who are the people in my life who maybe I don't have a close relationship with, but I want to model for them something? How can I do that? How can I do a better job of it? Or how am I modeling the wrong things right now? Like, so what if people who I don't know who are watching my life, and they might mirror me, or they might be marked by me? What am I showing them, or what am I doing that maybe is going to be the kind of influence I don't want to do? I think this is one of the reasons I'm a big fan of journaling. And you can do this without journaling, but journaling is an opportunity to kind of put some of these thoughts down on paper and to think about who am I influencing and how, and maybe set goals for yourself. This week I want to influence Merle to be a happier person, and so in order to do that, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then I go back next week and I look at that, and I'm like, I can't believe I wrote that. I didn't do anything about it. I've got to do better. So my reflection encourages me to step it up and do better. Or I can say, Merle smiled at me today, and it was the first time I've ever seen him smile, and I'm so happy that I've had this influence on him, right? So taking that time to reflect regularly can really help me do some of these other things. So I want you to take one of these this week and really say, this is where I'm gonna put my effort, so that I can be a person of influence. All right? So Andrew's gonna come up in just a second to do our discussion time. But before he does, I want to just tell you this. You guys get these new lanyards, right? Leave them here. We do not trust you to bring them back. You see, I'm not smiling right now. We do not trust you to bring them back, so we want them to be here for you next week. So on your way out, leave them here. But Andrew, come and lead us in discussion.
All right. Oh, this is a funny story about the One Way to Heaven sign. I remember at the last church I was at, we were trying to talk about marketing, and they were we were like yard signs, different things. So I was like, what about those car stickers? And the pastor's like, I will never do car stickers. He said, because I had an encounter one time where someone flipped me off, and as they drove by, I saw their church, and I was like, I don't want our church people driving around flipping people off, and they're like, oh, the gathering, okay? All right, so who are you influencing in your different life contexts? So after we've talked about this, we kind of opened with this, who are you influencing? So right now, when it comes to family, friends, work, church, who are you influencing in those life contexts?
My wife.
Wife, yeah. and being influenced, yeah.
My children.
Yeah, it's like the whole teacher thing. I realize now that as I get older too, I gotta be very careful about what I do, because they remember it all and mimic it very much so.
But speaking of that, so I have my youngest son is 41 years old, and he contacted me like a couple of weeks ago, and he sent me this song in a text, and he said, do you remember you used to play this song when I was little? And it was a good song, thank God. It's a very positive song. It's called Optimistic.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, you were really like paying attention. And so what we do around our kids, like he was really young, but he remembered that.
That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I don't always get it right in front of the kids, but I hope I get it right more oftentimes than I get it wrong, and they remember the right times.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll remember the funny times.
Yeah. Well,
I think of my job, my boss, like, whenever something happens that's like bad, and they reach out to you, and people do this thing where they're like, oh, I thought that so-and-so was gonna do that, or like, they try to push the responsibility onto someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I've noticed that like, whenever I actually like own up to it, like, okay, you know what, that was me, that was my bad, they take notice of that, and they're like,
yeah.
actually means a lot that you own up to it. So
Yeah, and it's like so uncommon sometimes when people are just like, you're right.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, what?
I know, yeah.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
So how does that reflect your core values?
Oh, man. Well, I think it reflects it by truth telling, and I think that's important because whenever I tell the truth, people, ultimately will take notice and be like, hey, you can actually trust Tennessee because he was honest whenever he messed up, and that makes me want to be honest, because then, I've been in conversations where my boss has done something and she's like, I'll own up to that was my bad, in the past where I've seen her be like, actually, I thought so-and-so was gonna do that, so I didn't, so, yeah, good thing
I think you can grow so much more with that kind of mindset too. I tell people, like, someone comes at you upset, you really did it, it's like, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. You know? And then most times, oh, okay, and then like, let's talk about how we can fix this. Anyone else want to share who you're influencing? Some of us did earlier, so.
Sure, I got one. So
Yeah.
anybody you pass, really, in a store or whatever, you have a chance to influence. We were talking about how, so I'm an introvert, and so used to be, I would see somebody that I was an acquaintance at a grocery store, and I would go down a different aisle so I wouldn't have to interact with them. And then I realized, you know, in the Bible it says we have to love people, and if I'm trying to avoid people, I can't possibly love them.
Yeah.
And so now, I've turned into my mother at the checkout, and I talk to everybody around me, which is kind of funny. But really, I mean, just anybody you pass, you can smile at or say hi to, or just ask them how they're doing, and it can really influence their day.
Absolutely.
Something that really hasn't been mentioned much in this at all that I think I've mostly been influenced was, I coached soccer mainly for like 25 years. And if you have a kid that you coached when they were this big come up to you with their kid and call you coach, and you see how great their life has become, and you know, the influence you had on them, even though you didn't know it years ago. I think that's probably where most of the influencing I think of, whether it be intentional or accidental or any of that, and all of that is kind of what I see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I received an email yesterday from a graduating senior, who said, I may not remember what I learned in second grade, but she was thanking me for, the impact of kindness that I put up. Like, I try to, like, you know, pound it in their heads to be kind, and that she said she left second grade confident, and I mean, it was just a really sweet,
That's awesome.
sweet email. And so again, it's like, you might not really think that you know, are making an impact, you know, because you think, oh, they're 7, they won't remember you when they're, you know, 18, but, so when you get those kinds of things, you're like, okay, I know why I do what I do, you know?
Yeah.
So, you just don't know who's, like I said, who's watching and
Oh, yeah.
what you're doing.
That reminds, one of my favorite parables is actually only in Mark, and I can't remember, it's like it's not the seed, it's like the farmer. I can't remember, it's a parable, it's only told in Mark, and basically it's the idea of, farmer goes out, he plants the seed, he doesn't know how it grows, he just plants it, and it grows, and when it's ready, he puts a sickle to it. And so I always like remind myself, like, cause where I have influence with ministry is like sometimes with youth too, or teachers, you think they have it one day and the next week they're like, oh, why are they not listening, and all this stuff, and I gotta remember, and I remind our youth leaders at times, like, we're just planting seeds and loving them, and sometimes it can be frustrating, and it takes a lot of patience, but down the road, we see those, you know, those seeds come to fruit, and come back and be like, you did awesome. It's like, I didn't think you were listening to me at all. Like, good grief. So that's good to remember the influence we have today, even though we may, when we're in contact with, may not see the produce or whatever, you know, of it, but later down the road, you know, we don't realize what we're doing.
So somebody over there mentioned social media, and I mean, we're all mostly kind of older in here, so we don't consider it as much. But somebody at that table mentioned that, and that's huge, right? Because there's a lot of negativity on social media.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you can kind of, people will look at what you're posting, but also you can help turn other people's lives around with what you post.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because that table right there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's like, you know, the influencer is an actual job now, like social media influencer, whether you like it or not. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, probably mostly bad, but no, I mean, because that's what, especially our kids and teens and adults are on social media constant. I did a study not too long ago. They're like, they get something like, I can't remember, it's like 5,000 to 10,000 notifications a day pushed at them to influence them to something. I'm like, that's just nuts to me. Like, yeah. All right, so where and how, go back. There you go. Where and how can you be a better influence this week? When you think about your context, family, friends, work, church, how can you be a better influence?
I think one of the ways for the how is to remember what God said about us when He said we're a light to this world.
I like that.
I'm gonna echo that because sometimes I think not everybody goes to church, and so when they see you you, if we're displaying the character of fruit of the Spirit, then that might make people curious, because they may never go to church, and so somebody had said one time, you may be the only Jesus people see, and you can impact their lives that way, so, yeah.
That's why I love,
Light.
in Hebrews it says to live at peace and be holy, because without holiness, people can't see the Lord. So when you're a peaceful person, holy, which is set apart, which means you're living different, that's the only way people can see there's something different, so that's good.
I think we have to be careful with that, because that message sometimes comes across as if we can flip a switch and just behave that way. And obviously that can't happen, at least in my experience, without Jesus. The problem I ran into is Army. I was taught not to show who I was and to subdue what I said. And so now I feel like my job now is to not do that, not subdue anymore. But I don't act the way I do because of, I feel I should act this way, but because that's in there now. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. Lincoln?
I think we mentioned it, but the intentionality of an influencer, you believing you have influence in all that you do, I think is a great way to understand that you can be intentional. That's a good way to start being influential. It's like, whatever I do is going to influence somebody, whether good or bad, so let's make sure it's good.
Yeah, that's good. Stop, pause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
You know, my grandfather always said charity first begins at home. And he said that if we can't love the people that we live with, it's not gonna be, it won't happen outside of the house. We have to first practice it at home. I feel like, we have our daughters living here and 2 son-in-laws. And sometimes I feel like we live in a fishbowl, my husband and I, because they're watching, even when you don't know they're watching. And then we can see the way they respond with their spouses. And sometimes I'm like, thank God, but sometimes I'm like, oh God.
The oh no.
Yes. It's like that resembles me, and I don't like it.
So that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the last question, this is a good one for us to think about, is who in your life is influencing you?
You are.
Huh?
You are. No pressure.
I look at the what, because I turned off like TV about a year ago and pretty much will watch YouTube videos now on 3D printing. But I mean, turning off the news was influencing me. I was a bitter dude when it came. I used to love politics. I became so bitter, and I think he gave a service he preached a sermon a few years ago about that. And I mean, because I used to burn people up on all the sites, like you're this and you're that. And then I finally walked away with, I'm still grumpy, but I'm less grumpy.
I'm gonna make. Well, we're gonna be happy now. He's gonna be thinking about that. How can I make him a happy person? Yeah, it's crazy. It's what you're like watching things. You don't even realize how it can just slowly change you and change your thoughts, your attitudes.
I think it's important to remember that sometimes somebody you poured into could turn around later and pour into you. So, depending on how that works out for you, because when we lived in Virginia, one of the first young people that we ever intentionally decided to love no matter what, she's 35 now, and we don't live in the same city anymore, but every once in a while she'll send messages to me about how we influenced her, and sometimes it's really important to her, but it's something we forgot about, right?
Yeah. So
one time when her mom was in the hospital, we had her for like 10 days, and we didn't think her mom was gonna make it. I mean, we were pretty sure this was like the end, and we were probably gonna be the ones to have to tell her mom died. I mean, it was getting really bad. And Merle picked her up from school, and she says to Merle, I really want a Furby. And he's like, so let it be written, so let it be done. We're gonna go get a Furby.
Yeah.
We're gonna go get a Furby carrying case, clothes for the Furby, whatever they have for the Furby, you're gonna get. And they drove to like 6 stores to find a Furby because it was at the time where you just couldn't find them anymore. And they drove all over Northern Virginia looking for Furbies and stuff. But she recently found her Furby, and she's like 35 now, and she's like, I remember when Merle took me to buy this Furby, you know, so you just don't know when that's gonna come back your way, right? When you've poured into somebody else and then they remind you, you know, what you do for people matters, so keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. It's funny, she said she's 35, I'm 34, and I remember when Furbies came out, trying to find Furbies back in the day. Me and my friends were convinced that little thing in his forehead was a camera. At the time, I think Bill Clinton was president. My friends were like, Clinton's watching. We're like 10 years old. That's good. Anyone else want to share who is influencing you?
My husband. I was gonna say, a recent example is I used to not be that great with my finances, and when we got married, he helped me with that. And now, we just bought a new car, and my credit score was higher than his. So he's influenced me to do that better.
That makes it what, a level 3 or 14 leader? I'm not really sure. I think it's 3. Which one's the one where you like pass it?
Oh, yeah. What level was that?
What's that?
I do, you do, we do.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, you basically passed it, and now it's like, I'm doing it, you gotta relearn.
Now
it.
you're
Cycle back to the beginning.
Let me teach you.
So one more that nobody's mentioned, I mean, the general climate, speaking of politics in this country, has changed. And some of us it influences more than others, like federal workers, but other people are being influenced. And there's a lot of things that were put in place to protect certain groups or to say certain groups were okay and valued, and a lot of that's being removed.
Okay.
And so I think at a time now, we have to know our core values, right? So we'll know how we respond when people in charge of us say things that maybe don't match up with our core values of, you know, how we care about people and view people and, you know, that sort of thing. So.
Makes sense. All right. Let's go to our homework now, and everyone's excited about this. So read chapter 9, the price tag of leadership, self-discipline, and developing the leader within you. This is the John Maxwell book. And then in the Leadership 101 Facebook group, post an action you are inspired to take after reading this chapter. And then the extra work for this week, journal. Complete at least 4 days in your journal that you got the first week. Read chapter 4 and chapter 10 in the book. Watch that video and watch that video. Will these be in the email? These will be sent out the email, so don't worry about this. All of this will be sent in the email to you guys. Real quick, is there any questions that you guys have over tonight, Facebook group, or anything else? All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, thankful for who you are, God, and what you do in our lives, Lord. And your grace and mercy go beyond anything we can comprehend, Lord. We're just so grateful and blessed, Lord. And so, Lord, I'm thankful tonight for this group as we talk about influence and realizing that we are influencing others, whether we know it or not, and we are being influenced. So let's just remember that this week, that as we go about our ways, that if we want the people around us to love you, to be more like you, and most of all come into a relationship with you, that we act and carry ourselves in a way to show those people those things, God. And if we don't have the people in our lives influencing us to where we want to go, to our goals, that Lord, you just put people in our lives that can be great influences to us as well, Lord. So Lord, I thank you for tonight. Thank you for these people. In your name we pray. Amen. Is there anything else you want to say? Leave your name tags.
You guys are awesome. Bring your name tags.
All right.
I would have just put it in my folder, but then I'll probably forget my folder.
So Friday, what time are we meeting? You don't have to decide now, just text me later.
Yes, sir, I do.
I'm gonna put it over here, 'cause I will.
My last assignment tomorrow.
Friday off because my son.
Friday. I wrote a front page. A plan.